In the previous video, we talked about non-participants and corner solutions and saw that a person with a low wage may choose not to work. Now we're going to look at another reason we might see this effect. If a person has a non-wage income, they may find that 24 hours of leisure is the best allocation for them. If you look at this initial budget constraint here, it corresponds to a certain wage and income per day. The tangency of the highest indifference curve is at 16 hours of leisure. Thus, they're working 8 hours. Let's say that they're going to experience a non-wage income. In our previous videos, we talked about the idea of grandpa giving an allowance. But it could come from many sources. The point is, it's something that is coming to you in the form of income that is not related to working. And what this does is it shifts the entire budget constraint up at every level of leisure by that non-wage income. So every point has a higher possible budget allocation. The new optimizing position is going to be where the budget constraint with the non-wage income is tangent to the highest indifference curve, here I2. That corresponds to 24 hours of leisure, no work. So what's happened is this person went from having no non-wage income and 16 hours of leisure to having non-wage income and 24 hours of leisure. They effectively went from working 8 hours a day to 0 hours a day. So who might be these non-participants from this non-wage income effect? One example would be teenagers, because teenagers have high non-wage income. That may sound odd, but even if grandpa or mom and dad don't give you a dollar allowance, if you're a teenager, you're still getting your rent paid for, living at home, you're getting your food paid for, your utilities paid for, and so there is a allowance in the form of goods and services that flow to you in the form of non-wage income. And so that leads teenagers to be more likely to have a allocation towards 24 hours of leisure, not participate. Another example would be older people. Older people are more likely to get Social Security benefits from the government or pension benefits from their ex-employer, and that's non-wage income. And they're less likely to participate. They're more likely to take 24 hours of leisure, retire. There are other groups that would fall into this category. Someone that is receiving welfare benefits from the government or disability, unemployment compensation. These are people that would be receiving non-wage income and as a result are more likely to take 24 hours of leisure and not participate. Let's look at a third reason why we might see a corner solution. Let's say that this has to do with a person's preferences. They're just going to go from preferring less leisure to more leisure. Another way of putting it in the terminology from before is they're going to go from being a workaholic to a leisure lover. We've got our initial budget constraint here and our initial indifference curve, I1. This indifference curve is tangent at 16 hours of leisure. So this person is working 8 hours. Now what's going to happen is their indifference curve is going to go from that of a workaholic, flatter, to that of a leisure lover, steeper. When that happens, they're going to find that this tangency no longer exists, and they're going to move to where the tangency does occur. And it's kind of hard to see there, but with this steeper slope, you know that the tangency is going to be to the right of 16 hours of leisure. And as a result, you're going to get 24 hours in this illustration. So this person went from 16 to 24 hours of leisure, effectively 8 hours of work to 0 hours of work because their preference for leisure has changed. Who might these people be? Well, one example would be people that have a lot to do when they're off. People that have very interesting hobbies, people that maybe like to travel a lot, people that value their leisure time extensively. I've had colleagues that have taken up hobbies, and over time that leads them to work less and sometimes even retire. Okay? Another possibility is that they become disabled or injured or sick, and their preference for more leisure and less work is more by necessity. But certainly it would incentivize non-participation if somebody is unable to perform the duties of a job. So that's a possibility as well. Now, who might fall into these groups? Well, again, we're going to come back to teenagers and older people. Teenagers fall into this group in part because younger people may have a lot of leisure activities they partake in. And no doubt, school is one of them. So their preference might be towards leisure over working simply because they're going to go to school. But it could also be they have robust social lives and they like to have fun and do fun things. Another group might be older people, because people that are older are more likely to have those injuries, those disabilities, and just getting older in general probably leads to more fatigue and from work. So leisure becomes more valuable as one gets older. Notice the pattern here. We've looked at 3 explanations for a non-participant corner solution. Low wages was the first, non-wage income was the second, and now we have a change in preferences towards leisure. All 3 of those seem to be most influential among teenagers, younger people, and elderly people, which helps us understand why those 2 groups have the lowest participation in the labor market. Moving on, let's now talk about over and under employment. This is the idea that you're either employed more than you want to be, overemployment, or you're employed less than you want to be, underemployment. Let's start with overemployment. Take a look at this individual here. They have a budget constraint exemplified by this line. Looks like they have some non-wage income as well, because at 24 hours of leisure, the vertical intercept is above 0. So regardless, this is their budget constraint. Initially, this person would choose, if they had their choice of how many hours to work in a day, they would choose the highest indifference curve that they could get to, while still touching the budget constraint. Again, the tangency at U1. They would choose 18 hours of leisure and 6 hours of work. As many of you know, a 6-hour workday is harder to get than an 8-hour workday. So what we're going to do is force them to get into a 8-hour workday. Now, they don't want that, right? They want 18 hours of leisure. They want 6 hours of work. They want to be here. But we're going to put them in an 8-hour-a-day job. And what does that do? Well, it forces them to 16 hours of leisure. It forces them to this point here. It forces them to a lower indifference curve. It puts them in a position that is not optimal. And as a result of this, they're going to be overemployed. They're going to be working more than they want to. The consequences reveal themselves in higher turnover. These are individuals that are more likely to quit the job. And as we'll see later, turnover is not good for a business, because when you lose employees at a higher rate, because you're overemploying them here, you have to hire new employees, you have to train those new employees, and your costs of production go up. Another potential consequence is absenteeism. These are people that are more likely to call in sick or say, I'm sick and I need to go home early. They're essentially a square peg in a round hole. They're being forced into a situation that is untenable and reveals itself through consequences. So what's the managerial solution? Well, if you want to avoid the consequences of overemploying people, then you would allow these people part-time work and let them do 6 hours if that's what is optimal for them. Get them to here instead of forcing them to be here. And some businesses do that. Underemployment, in contrast, is where you want more hours, but you don't get that. Take a look at this individual. Again, we have a budget constraint, and the optimal outcome for this point, for this person, is U1, that is the highest indifference curve they can reach, given their budget constraint. This person wants 10 hours of leisure. In other words, they want to work 14 hours a day. But employers like the 8-hour day. That's conventional. So they're going to be forced into 16 hours of leisure and 8 hours of work. They're going to be forced to U2, which is not a tangency, which is a lower indifference curve than they themselves would reach if they were able to work 14 hours. How is this outcome going to be revealed? Well, second jobs, what we call moonlighting, where this person, if they're forced to take 16 hours of leisure and they want only 10 hours of leisure, well, they're probably going to go and try to find another job to complement the 8-hour-a-day job they already have. Now, there are effects on the business from this. If you've ever worked in management or ever do work in management, you'll find that employees at Moonlight are often tired and their performance suffers from that. So what is the managerial solution? Well, again, allowing them to work more hours would solve this problem. However, it's important to note that because of institutional limitations on hours worked per day, it may not be realistic to get them from 8 hours of work to 14 hours of work. Because remember, once an employer employs someone in the U.S. over 8 hours a day, they're going to have to pay a 50% premium called overtime for every hour above 8 hours. So they're not going to want to do this. And that means this person is likely going to stay underemployed and or have to take on second jobs at a different employer. Next, let's talk about income maintenance programs. These are programs that are designed to assist people that for one reason or another are not participating in the labor force, are not working. Examples include the EBT program, which stands for Electronic Benefit Transfers. You may see those signs at various fast food places where they accept EBT. That's a government program that provides them money to purchase food. And temporary assistance to needy families. This is the big one, also known as TANF, sometimes called the welfare program. And again, this is assistance for people that don't have income of their own. When we look at income maintenance program, whatever form they take, we're going to see some parallels. There's going to be a benefit, which we'll abbreviate B. That's what's received if the individual or family has no earned income. There's also going to be a benefit tax. We'll abbreviate that T. That's the reduction rate by which the benefit is decreased as income is increased. For example, if there is a benefit reduction rate of 0.5, that means for every dollar that a person earns in income, they would have their benefit reduced by 50 cents. Then there's earned income. This is the amount of income that they earn from a job, and we abbreviate that Y. And then there's the subsidy, which is the benefit that they get minus the tax, benefit tax, times their income. And we'll detail this out a little bit more in the next video.